Welcome everyone. I'd like to call to order the January 25th Kings Board of Education work session and regular meeting. Mr. Porter, if you would be so kind to do the roll call.
Here. Technology. Mr. Scroll here. Mrs. Groff.
Here.
Ms. Phillips.
Here.
Mrs. Carroll.
Here.
And Mr. Belform is absent.
Please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, if I could get a motion to approve our agenda for this evening.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Porter.
I'm sorry, now who was the second?
That was me.
Okay.
Mr. Porter, if you'll take the roll, please, on that agenda for the agenda.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Scroll,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
and Mrs. Carroll.
Yes. Now we have reports and presentations. Mr. Sears is going to have a presentation for us for National School Boards Month.
Technology.
One of those. Yeah.
So this evening, we are here and as part of January, annually is School Board Recognition Month. And so we're very fortunate tonight that this organization, this regular session and work session to recognize 4 of our board members who are here this evening. I want to thank them for their tireless efforts. And some of you are starting into this journey of school boards. So it's a great way to start. And for those of you that have been a part of this for a while, we really appreciate all of your efforts. We at this time, we want to take an opportunity to show appreciation and thank you for your dedication, your service, and your commitment and appreciation for the work that you are doing and will continue to do for the Kings Local School District moving forward. Too often we forget about the sacrifices that many of you make as you have other jobs and lives outside of the school board world. And we know that this work is tireless and it's valuable in your leadership. It's extremely important to us moving forward. Too often your efforts go unnoticed, and as decisions are questioned and celebrated and criticized, probably all in the same decision. But all of those things are really important for us moving forward as you guide and lead us and lead our district. Our school board is one of more than 700 school boards across the state. It's a huge responsibility and one that should not be taken lightly. So at this time, we want to thank Mr. John Skirl, Mrs. Deb Cowan, Mrs. Jenna Ruff, and Mrs. Peggy Phillips and Mr. Stacy Beltram for your leadership, your dedication, and continued support of Kings Local School District. Thank you very much. With that, we have a couple of things. Each board member, we have a certificate of recognition, and then you are receiving notes from our students in our district from various buildings telling you how much they appreciate you. This is why you're doing the work, and this is why you're here, and we wanted that reminder for you this evening.
Thank you.
So I will read a couple that came across to me, and you guys can take those and be good for you at different times. But one of them says, "We know you work so hard for us. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for all you do. We are lucky to have a board like you." These are from some of our elementary students. It says, "Thank you for your time and supporting us," from KME. Another KME student says, "Dear Kings School Board, thank you for your time. Thank you for supporting us. Students are lucky to have you. We know you work hard, and for that, we appreciate it." And then the last one that says, "Thank you for making the tough decisions in our district." So thank you to our students meeting on board. We appreciate all that you do, your dedication, and it's valuable to have good leadership, and we appreciate your work. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sears.
So before we begin tonight, I just want to take a moment in time just to talk a little bit about kind of frankly, the decision that we made recently to close school. That has been a couple of questions in our community about how that happens and kind of what that looks like. And certainly as superintendent, we have the ability to navigate just as we would on snow days or different weather type situations. And the decision to close school was something that it's one of the most difficult decisions a superintendent can make. Is our primary business is to have our students in school in person and learning. And so the rationale behind that decision had a lot to do with the fact that over the course of the week prior and the weeks since we had been back from break, we had seen a significant amount of student absences and especially staff absences. And when our staff are out, oftentimes we are unable to secure adequate subs. And I know there's been a lot of media coverage and different efforts. There is a workforce shortage. Well, substitute teachers are not immune to that. And so we were experiencing a lot of that too. And we continue to experience a lot of that. And so the rationale for that decision to close school was in large part due to the number of staff absences that we had, as well as the amount of time, energy, and effort that took place all week long just to keep our schools open. So that accumulation of effort and the accumulation of time and the number of subs that we were short over multiple days prompted us to take some action to give our teachers and our students the ability to kind of press pause so that we could come back from a long weekend. And many of our teachers were going to be back, or our staff would be back, and our students would be back after that short pause. So in that decision, I know that I personally contact each board member just to make sure that they are aware. I often don't make arbitrary decisions and will consult and communicate with each board member. And in those discussions that we also entertain some discussions around our current, at that point in time, the mask requirement for our pre-K through 6 students was set to expire that following Tuesday. So if this we close school on Friday, the 14th, then the 18th, our students were welcome back without mask pre-K through 6. At that point in time, I entertained a discussion and recommended to our board at that point in time, we needed to probably extend our mask requirement for 9 additional days as we analyze the fact that what we were reading and the doctors that we were working with and reporting out and hearing and kind of some trends that we were close to maybe what would be considered a peak, and we could give us a little bit of a pause, 9 days additional, that we could then analyze where our student numbers are and our staff numbers are. So that was something that it was something I consulted with the board, but I communicated this is what I believe would be best for us to maintain services for our kids. Again, our goal is to try to keep our buildings open. And it didn't make sense to me at the time for us, if we were in a position where we had to cancel school, that we would follow back up the next week and we would reduce the mitigation strategies that we had in place to try to keep our buildings open. We needed to maintain that. We didn't increase anything, which there was some question on should we have required that even more. And we did not, because that was not an initial decision the Board of Education made, nor did we actively seek parent feedback on that earlier in the year. And so since we had feedback from our families, we knew the direction and we knew what had been in place for the semester, that coincided with the school closure and the extension of the mask requirement. And so as a result of that, this is not without significant effort, hard work, and a lot of sacrifice on folks within our district and within our buildings. And we were in school each day last week. There were some questionable experiences, especially early on. But since then, we've seen the trend in our student absence rates and our teacher absence rates improve over the course of time. So I believe that was a strategy that was effective for us to move forward and get us to this point where we are. So I just wanted to clarify that, just a little bit about that decision-making, kind of what that looked like, why we're in the position we're in, and kind of some of the positive trend we've seen as a result of that as we move forward through this week and then and look to move forward. So
Mr. Sears, one of the pieces that I don't know if you forgot, didn't think about mentioning it, but I know at one meeting, Mrs. Cowan asked a question, at another meeting, I asked the same question, which was, we had said before to the previous superintendent, please continue keeping us posted and making those decisions when necessary. And I think we both asked that question of you to make sure you felt comfortable with that also.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And Greg, I had a question about the attendance numbers right now as far as the absent rate. You said we were in a more positive trend. Do you feel like that we're still, that the removal of the mask, that we're in a point where it's making more sense? How are you feeling about our overall absence rate and our faculty absence particularly?
So I'll answer that question this way, that when the board voted in December to apply a mask removal on January 18th, we are starting to see our student absence rates and our teacher absence rates mirror that point in time in December. So we had a significant uptick in absences as we returned from break. But I would say at this point, when that decision was made and when the board made that decision, we're starting to see some similar numbers. Now, again, things could change overnight, but we've seen some real downward trend of number of students that are absent and the number of teachers that are absent. So I would answer that question that way, that it mirrors that same point in time. It's pretty close to that.
So, Mr. Sears, as we're trending downward, can we expect that the mandate will continue to end as planned this Friday, the last day?
Yeah, what I would say based on those numbers and the trends and based on the information that the previous board especially voted to remove the mask requirement, our numbers continue to trend. I would see us moving forward with that.
I just want to take a minute and thank all of the teachers and administrators for what they went through the last couple weeks. We were in crisis mode, and the teachers really stepped up and gave up their planning periods and worked like crazy to keep these classes covered. And so thank you to every staff member out there. And even the people sitting at this desk, I know you guys were out in the buildings working, and I know this was so hard on our administrators. So thank you to everybody.
I think that's a great point that I can't reiterate enough. I mean, every single day I'm checking my phone. Where are we? This team leaned in and continues to. Every building principal exhausts themselves trying to, how do we cover our teachers, our paraprofessionals, all of our staff are doing great work each day for our students and sacrificing a lot. And it's hard. And many of us have been in education a long time. I've been in education for 24 years. I've never seen anything like this before, as far as people and covering and leaning in and supporting, doing everything we can to try to have school. So like I said, we're seeing some positive trends. Let's hopefully that continues.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sears. And Mr. Skrull, this is your debut as the legislative update representative. So do you have something for us tonight?
Honestly, no, there is nothing to report this month. Going back through what was reported in the December meeting, there's been nothing new that has been signed by Governor DeWine. And there is nothing legislative coming our way right now. Do have some things that could be coming up next month, but at this time, nothing to spell out.
All right. Well, thank you. And next up, we have public participation. And before we call our first public participant, I do have a statement to read. And so I don't forget, Mr. Porter is embracing his role as our timekeeper. And he asked me to let you know that when you have about 30 seconds left, he's going to put his hand up for you just so that you're aware. So as you speak, just be aware of that. When you see his hand up, he's just letting you know you have about 30 seconds left. Here's our statement. The Kings Local Board of Education encourages all parents, staff members, and community members to attend meetings and encourages visitors to participate in their meetings. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to state his or her reason for addressing the board. We ask that speakers avoid personal attacks on individuals during their public address to the board. If an individual has an issue with an employee, we ask that you request a private meeting with the superintendent or that employee's direct supervisor. Please keep in mind that the Board of Education meetings are held so that the board can conduct their business in public. The board president is the spokesperson for the board and may need to consult with other board members in order to respond to the public. If a question from the public can be answered immediately, it may be. However, if time is needed to study the issue, the board may choose to make a statement at a later date. All right, and first up, we have Amy Vance.
Hello. Should I start? Okay, thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Amy Vance. My twin boys are 4 and they go to the King's Preschool and after school care. They're both on IEPs. One of my twins, however, is medically fragile. He had open heart surgery at the age of 2. He's also spent 2 months in the NICU, even though he was born at 36 weeks, came home with oxygen for 6 months due to severe obstructive apnea, and has 5 consecutive surgeries complications, along with years on a feeding tube, countless visits, and multiple admissions to Cincinnati Children's. Unfortunately, his heart has gotten worse. He has regurgitation against his pulmonary valve, which puts added pressure on his heart. He will likely require another open heart surgery to replace his valve. I appreciate the school board is in a tough position being asked to make decisions which should be at a higher level around the health department, especially with this widespread public health issue. That said, let me ask you, when you, your parent, your spouse, or go to the doctor, you find out you have high blood pressure or cholesterol and need to be put on meds, do you listen to the recommended advice and take medications, or do you ignore the expert opinion, not take them, and risk heart attack or stroke? When your child has strep throat, do you not fill the prescription for the antibiotic the doctor prescribed? I would hope the answer is no, that you listen to the expert opinion in an area that you not only have advanced schooling on and training on, but years in the field and the front lines protecting us. Hundreds of doctors, pediatricians, and those working at children's hospitals across the nation and locally have signed petitions, even put an ad in the New York and LA Times pleading for kids to be universally masked at schools. Cincinnati Children's also has on their website the same plea. Why would you go against medical advice and expert advice for our children when you listen to your doctors when you and your family need care? Our preschoolers don't yet have access to the vaccine, a proven layer of protection against COVID. Cincinnati Children's Heart Institute stance is that my son should be vaccinated once available. It's not yet available to him, his twin, or children under the age of 5. Both Moderna and Pfizer vaccine are weeks away from sending their trial data to the FDA for approval of this age group. We need to give our kids the opportunity to have that layer of protection against COVID before we consider lifting the mask mandate at preschool. As a disabled child, my son has a right to a safe education. Going against medical advice, dropping the mask mandate does not and will not provide a safe environment. These kids have been masked for nearly 2 years. Why, when we're so close to providing all children's access to the vaccines, would we remove our foot off the gas? I've heard the argument that kids don't wear masks properly or touch their faces, etc. These doctors know and appreciate all of this. They are parents too. They see the kids in offices, clinics, and hospitals. They understand and appreciate how children are, and their advice is still universal masking. If the school board removes the mandate for these children, it is reckless and would knowingly create an unsafe environment, not only for my boys, but all others.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Next, we have Leanne Ho.
I'm here to express my disappointment in this board. Extending the mask requirement, breaking promises, and ignoring the deleterious effects of masks on our children is bad enough, but the way this was done was awful. 3 of you made it very clear you were against the requiring masks for kids and said it should be a parent's choice. What changed? Were you lying then, or were you too cowardly to stand up for the kids of the parents and the parents of this district? None of the recently elected board members took the time to explain their decision to the stakeholders in this district. Instead, you hid. If you're too cowardly to stand up for the kids in this instance, I don't have a lot of faith you'll stand up for them when we face different problems in the future. The lack of transparency and the apparent attempt to avoid accountability speaks volumes of how you view the community. As board members, you represent the parents and the students and have an obligation to make the best choices possible for them. The way this was handled shows you either agreed with this harmful policy or you abdicated the responsibility by allowing the superintendent to unilaterally impose his will on the kids. If you truly believe it is the parents' rights to choose whether or not to put an ineffective, dirty rag on the kids' faces, why would you not stand up for the parent and the child by publicly opposing it and fighting against the rule? Is the mental and physical health of our students' district not important enough for you to stand your ground? We deserve the answers, and there should be no question on how you stand on such important issues. You all need to look really hard in the mirror and figure out if this is the right role for you. You need to do better. You all took the easy way out and at the kids' expense. You can claim you're opposed to the mask requirement, but if you're unwilling to be the one to make the decision to remove them, what good are you?
Hale Husband.
My name's Hale Husband. I've been in the district well over 30 years. And what I would like to do is I want to pass out to the board members a form. I'll do it for you. As one of the responsibilities of the board is to have one member as a member of the Warren County Career Center. I spend a lot of time over there, and one of the things that I worked at many years ago was CLEP, College Level Examination Program. And talking to them over there, I find out that we have a very low participation rate in the Kings District. And the advantage of this is that we have 2 ways. In the testing CLEP on that college level, persons can take those tests, just as we take the IP, we take all these other tests. They can take these tests and get credit for them. Now, if they do it through the Modern States website, they can actually get this for free, okay, based on their income. And what I do not understand is we have a representative that goes to the Career Center, correct? Do we? Yes. What, oh, Peggy, I'm sorry. Okay. But anyway, the issue here is, why is our participation rate so low versus those of Springboro versus the other schools in this area? We originally had a very good program. And now for some reason, I understand with what's going on with health and all of that, but we can get prepared to change, to give these kids more opportunities. Through the CLEP testing and through Modern States, we have the ability, they could do this, some of this at home. This test could be free to them, and it goes towards credit for a college course. They can get signed off, and there's over 3,000 colleges that accept this data. And my point here is, we need to get more involved with the Warren County Career Center, particularly Mr. Robert Bob Sheehan, who has the program. And this was brought up because I was originally on this board for many years, and we had a good program. And for some reason, it's kind of mellowed out. And I'd like to see us get in competition with other school districts, particularly Springboro, and there's some other, Little Miami. We have the ability, because we have a gentleman, a young man who took the IP class or AP, just finished it, scored 100%. So we have the people here available, and we have these kids in the lower extreme of the cost factors that could actually do this and get college credit. And we, the type of teachers that we have, there's support there to do that. It's just bringing it to everybody's attention, showing everyone what it's about and explaining it. Thank you.
Next, we have Ruth Ann.
Good evening. First, I would like to welcome the new members to the board. Recently, and I've emailed the nurse, she doesn't get back to me. The SLE nurse sent out an email on January 4th saying, and I quote, "I strongly recommend mask wearing and vaccination to prove the health of our SLE community. That is not her place and she overstepped. We all know by now masks don't work. Even the CDC stated recently if it's not an N95 mask, it isn't going to do anything to prevent transmission, and these kids are not wearing N95 masks. If you're going to mandate it, mandate N95 masks." We also all know that these vaccines cause myocarditis, pericarditis, and blood clots in young children, and that's just what they are admitting publicly. If you go to the CDC-run VAERS programs, you will see many more injuries these children are having. Medical decisions are a private matter between a parent and their child's doctor, as they know their medical history best. The nurse needs to retract her statement and apologize. Thank you.
Diana Harvey.
Hi there, and welcome to the new board members. We're glad to have you. I'm here for a third month in a row to talk about masking yet again. So you're going to continue to have my presence until the masks are removed from my child, period. We're at that point. I was very disappointed to see the extension of the mask requirement for kindergarten through sixth graders. My continued point of frustration that I've expressed to the board members and to Mr. Sears over the period of time is that we're making decisions based on how we feel and gut reaction and not actually based on data and what we're learning from benchmarks across the entire country. So it's interesting that, you know, we're of course, we're seeing an uptick in infection rates, but as I went back through the actual data for Kings, going back to the early part of December, we're continuing to see that the issue is not with the younger children. It's continued to be with the older kids, but then it's interesting because, you know, our high school students are not required to be masking, and yet their data looks pretty similar to the elementary schools. So I'd like to know, as we move forward, what are the guidelines that the board is going to, and the superintendent are going to put into place around masking our children? And let's make sure that we adhere to those guidelines. Thank you.
And next we have Colleen Sheeter.
I'd like to talk to you tonight about the way the mask mandate was continued. To say it was done in the shadows is an understatement. Our board, a properly elected board, had a vote to end the mask mandate, and that was obliterated without public discussion. That is not the way things should be done. It's one thing, your campaign promises, whatever, you got to make your decisions when you're sitting on this board. But you can't do it in the shadows. If you needed to make a vote, you had plenty of time for an emergency meeting. There was plenty of time to make that decision. It's not fair to our superintendent to leave all of these decisions up to him We're looking at him tonight and asking him, what are we going to do? That's not appropriate. You're here to make those decisions. That's your job. Your superintendent tonight just told you tonight, reminded you that your involvement as a board member is invaluable. So step up, have the meetings, have public discussion, let the public be heard, make your decisions. And I'm sorry, but it is unreasonable to imagine that last year's vote for a different superintendent for a different school year carries over as carte blanche to our superintendent on these decisions. And furthermore, it's not appropriate to put that all on his head. There are 5 of you. Take the responsibility, meet in public and make the vote. And tonight I urge you to make that vote that you should have been made in December. Are you going to give our superintendent carte blanche or not? If you're going to do it, have a vote. But to have private discussions is not the way a Board of Education is supposed to work. Thank you.
All right, thank you to all of our public participants. Now we're going to move on to our treasure items. If we can have a motion for these items, which are our financial items, our public request log, the minutes from our previous meetings, and the daily substitute teacher and building substitute teacher adjusted pay rate.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Mr. Porter, do you have some things to present to us?
Yeah, who's the motion?
As well.
Okay. And you were second, correct? Okay,
If I would for just a second, Mr. Porter, the daily substitute teacher and building substitute teacher adjusted pay rate, I believe is under my items. So if you don't mind, if it would please the board, I'd like to discuss that under my items and,
No problem.
all right, thank you.
Do we need to amend that motion then?
Should we amend the motion, Mr. Porter?
I would amend the motion,
Okay.
just for clarity, yes.
So Mrs. Groff, do
Yes,
you want
sir.
to make your motion?
it's not under mine, is it?
I apologize. On the paper, it looked like it was, so I'm going to pull it up online so it's easier for me to read. No problem.
Okay. Because I'm saying as a first item under the treasurer,
You have minutes and then financial items and then public request log.
right, okay, and that was the motion for the treasurer's report, right?
So I'll amend that motion for just your treasurer items.
Okay. Okay,
And Mr. Skirl, will you?
I will amend my second on that as well.
Perfect.
okay. First of all, we have the minutes for December. New board members may vote upon the minutes. And because minutes do not become an official record of the board until it's ratified that the minutes are accurate. And the fact that you may or may not have been there, you are now establishing this is the official position. So with that said, Mr. Furnace drafted these minutes and left them. So, are there any questions or concerns of what's reflected in the minutes?
No.
Okay. The next item is financial reports. And most of these items were included based on past practice. Unless there's some specific item that you want to address, I'd like to refer you to what to me is the top item, and that's the financial report that's been reflected in colorful form. And I'll address the first page, which to me is the most important. It is reflecting our progress to our 5-year forecast. And if you'll notice, at the end of December, compared to the forecast, we're running $27,000 ahead of projection on a $59 million budget. That's immaterial. There's too many variables in there. But keep in mind, that's to our projections and not to our final cash balance, because if you recall the 5-year forecast, we were projecting a huge deficit this year, growing even more so for next school year. So with that said, any additional information you'd like for all the items that were presented here? The donations for the new board members of your work, the board recognized it constitutes a contribution that's deductible. And I haven't checked it, but I assume we have someone that officially notifies each one of those folks for their records. And the third item that I had was the public records requests. We've started putting those in spreadsheet form, including those each month. So with that, that concludes, unless there's any specific questions.
See any questions? If you could please take the Mr.
Yes. Mrs. Ralph,
Yes.
Mr. Squirrel,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Keller.
Yes. And Mr. Sears, is it correct that you do not have any approval items tonight?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. Now we'll move on to our Assistant Superintendent of HR and Business. And it looks like we have 2 items, personnel items and the daily substitute teacher and building substitute teacher adjusting pay rate. Can I get a motion for the approval of those items?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. And if you have anything to present to us, go right ahead.
Thank you, Vice President Cowan, Kings Board of Education. 2 items, as you mentioned. The first are the board items for approval personnel recommendations, staff resignations, new employees, staff miscellaneous items, and supplementals and stipends, along with temporary employment. There are 2 recommendations that I would like to point out. One under staff miscellaneous items is Miss Jessica Gorman. Jessica stepped in to be our interim before and after childcare coordinator in somewhat of a staffing crisis at the outset of the school year. She's done a phenomenal job of recruiting and retaining our before and after care employees, and look forward to recommending her and watching her continued work and strengthening that program. Second, under stipends, we have a veteran childcare and summer staff employee, Miss Sherry Kane, who will oversee our summer camp and do the same. She looks forward to continuing our work of having a strong summer program here in Kings. She's begun recruiting employees, and she'll also start reaching out to line up field trips and so forth as we continue on with our summer camp program over the summer months. Any questions on the personnel items in addition to those 2 employees? I'll be happy to answer any that you may have. Second item up for discussion and approval this evening is our adjusted substitute teacher rates. The board is maybe aware that we are members of the Southwest Ohio Council of Governments under the Warren County ESC and the Butler County ESC. There are a number of schools. I added a chart on the agenda for you that shows all districts and their subrates, along with traditional districts and their subrates. You will see that Kings is on the lower end of that spectrum. In our brief history with the Southwest Ohio Council of Governments, we've had the opportunity to adjust the rate on an average of once a year. We have adjusted it previously from $85 to $92 a day. We have seen recent spikes in these rates as there has been a substitute teaching crisis. Mr. Sears mentioned earlier, we've seen a dip in our fill rates really since the pandemic began, and even more so recently. That has put a strain on our teachers, as we mentioned, to cover those classes. And so in an effort to honor and retain the substitutes that we currently have, we are recommending that we become more competitive with school districts that are in our area. You'll notice on that list, we have Lakota, Little Miami, Mason, are all in the area of 125 a day, which is what we are proposing. Again, so we can honor and retain those substitutes. Can't say that this is necessarily going to bring more substitutes on board, but we certainly can't lose the ones that we have. Mason is not a member of the SWOCOG. That's why they are highlighted in red. but they are an area school district and that is their sub rate. So I wanted to include them. And we also have it on good authority that Springboro is also motioning to approve a pay raise from $100 a day to $125. So they are also highlighted in red in that area.
If we approve this evening, when will this take effect?
Actually, that's a great question. Thank you, Mrs. Cowan. It would take effect today. It would be retroactive to today because of the SWOCOG's operations. I think that has to do with their adjustments.
Right, I'm not sure, I did not get an answer this afternoon
Okay.
from the call, exactly what day they can make that effective for the call.
That, and speaking with their treasurer, we have to make this decision if we're going to make a change by February 10th, and it will be effective January 25th because of the way they do their salary adjustments.
And then previously, a daily sub made $8 less than a building sub, and I'm noticing the proposed rate is for them to be the same. Was there a particular reasoning, or was it just because the number 125 felt like the right number and that we wouldn't need to go higher on the building sub?
Another great question. For our building subs, I wanted to make it more attractive for them to be in our buildings each and every day as opposed to be looking elsewhere for pay raises. So we did offer an additional $8 more than what we were doing for our building subs. Now that we're asking for a daily rate to be 125, I'm also asking for the building sub to be 125 as well, because that is competitive with area school districts.
That sounds fair.
That was my question, is the building sub pay in line with the other school districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Have other schools recently moved up to this 125 range?
Yeah, I would say all of those schools. I know Lakota and Mason, when they made the jump, there was quite a bit of press. I remember seeing that in the news. We were also looking at increasing our rate. So those schools that are in that 125 range are recent moves. And we know that there are other schools that are also looking to increase their rates. Springboro will be effective today as well. So they moved from 100 to 125. Their rate will be effective January 25th too.
And I can say that the Warren County Career Center, or as listed vocational school district, we just raised the sub pay 2 weeks ago.
So I think,
140, is that
To 150.
to 150?
the point that Mr. Spinner made a few minutes ago was that typically there's one window of time a year to make an adjustment, and that window was early in the year. And it's one of those things where those adjustments are made and we don't always know till afterward. So you think you're competitive and then the adjustments are made and then you're, okay, that looks different. So we're fortunate to have another window of opportunity for us to adjust that. Otherwise, we're in a position where we would have to be consistent with the current rate for the remainder of this year. So we're fortunate to have another opportunity that will put us in a better category as far as where our subs are.
Mr. Spinner, when was the last time that sub rates were increased?
I believe it was the 1920 school year. We went from $85 to $92. So it was a $7 increase last time. And that again was just for the same reasons, to be competitive with other school districts, because all of us were seeing issues with substitute teachers.
And on average, how many substitute teachers do we have every day?
Oh, goodness. It's a tough question to answer just because it's somewhat of a moving target. I know as of recently, we've got anywhere from 10 to 15 filled positions. And there's maybe twice that in opportunity. But again, that's different from day to day. I would say prior to the pandemic, not speaking about the number of opportunities, but looking at the fill rate, we were probably in the 85 to 90% fill rate. Early on in the pandemic, you're looking at 50%. As of late, 30, 35% fill rate. So that means 60, 65, 70 uncovered, depending on how many were out.
And I know we've gotten a lot of feedback on this issue, so I really appreciate administration looking into this and being so responsive, because I know that this has been an issue that we've had, and based on what's been happening with our fill rates, I think that this will, this is a move in a positive direction. So thank you for this recommendation.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for your support. We're looking at additional creative ways in which to increase our sub pool. One might be, and you can expect to hear more about this in the coming weeks ahead, is to possibly have a job fair of sorts for substitute teachers, food service staff, bus drivers, just to continue to do a call out and provide people with information and bring more and more on board so that we can have everything there at one night and try to work through that process and increase our sub pools in all areas.
And just for clarification, because I did receive some negative feedback about the removal of the requirement for a bachelor's degree. That was something that the district didn't put in place. That was the state of Ohio. And is that temporary in nature?
To my understanding, that was something that Governor DeWine signed in for an extended period of time to help us get through this process.
Okay.
I have only had maybe a handful in that situation reach out to me. Some of them are former students of ours who are currently in the College of Education at various colleges and universities who are interested in teaching in the future, and they might be able to help us out on spring breaks if they don't align with ours, or when they're out early in the summer prior to us being over with school. So we don't have very many that are interested in that particular opportunity, but we work very closely with the COG to vet those candidates as well to make sure that they're a fit for us.
Can you just explain what you just said so the board is aware that when we do get someone and what your process is?
Yeah, the process is a little bit different. So we work closely with the Council of Governments. They have their own onboarding process. And so if someone reaches out to us, I have to work closely with them to make sure that that vetting process is exactly the same way it is and that they've got our recommendations. So it's someone that we're aware of and we know is going to be a good fit. So there are representatives of the Warren County Educational Service Center, for instance, that I'm constantly in communication with over who these candidates are and who's coming into our school buildings to make sure, again, that they're a fit for us.
So I think the key is there, just to summarize that if subs are going through the normal process and having a sub license and they have a degree, the COG handles that and they become a part of that. But anyone that is based on the new requirement, we have to vet and basically give approval to actually teach in their district. So Mr. Spinner does that. And that's what he said. He validates that they're a quality person that actually could do work in our district. So there's that, the COG put in an extra layer to make sure, because they weren't comfortable just signing off on these folks without us having some input.
And those particular applicants would only work in our district. The same would be true for other districts in the COG.
That's correct.
I have a question for Mr. Porter. Will this difference adversely affect our bottom line in any way that we should be concerned?
That is the most elusive answer. It's day to day. For example, if we got 2 more subs, right now we're having to pay teachers to cover classes. So that would reduce what we're paying, both elementary and high school. And it varies, maternity leaves. It could be up and down. It seems to be that we right now are in a higher cycle than in previous years with the extended leaves for maternities, long-term illness and all that. I believe it to be minimal, but we spent hours trying to get it. And we look at the calendar year 21, who can predict 22 using that as a basis? So, and not to discount the fact that when teachers are having to double up and so forth, you're affecting instruction really in 2 classes. So there's that value add to trying to get that so it isn't an extra burden on our regular teachers. So
Thank you.
I think it'll be minimal, but as I say, I can't predict staff long-term, even short-term. So.
Any other discussion? All right, Mr. Porter, if you'll call the roll.
Yeah. Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mrs. Groff,
Yes.
Mr. Squirrel,
Yes.
Mrs. Cowan.
Yes. Next, we have our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Programs approval items, those being bullying incident report, the 2021 report card presentation, the instructional materials for adoption, KHS College and Career Catalog for 2022-23 school year, and the plan for financial literacy. Can I have a motion for those items?
Mrs. Cowan, we actually are only asking for you to approve instructional materials for adoption and the catalog and career catalog. The other ones are reports we're giving.
Okay,
So it would just be for those 2, 3, and 4.
okay, so this particular motion would be specifically for approval of the instructional materials for adoption and the KHS College and Career Catalog for the 22-23 school year. Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
All right, and if you'll go ahead, Ms. Martin?
So do we want to do an approval around those discussion items, or can we go through all 5 and then come back to them? Or would you prefer we have the discussion around 3 and 4?
Let's go ahead and do the discussion around 3 and 4 that we need to vote on, and then we can do the presentations.
Sounds good. So Mr. Freeman is in the back kind of running the board for us. So he's going to talk about that. So you might have to turn to listen to Matt for a little bit.
The first one is the adoption of some curriculum materials. These are some items that we've had conversation with you about last month. There are 2 items there that we're asking for you to improve, 2 novels actually to get into the instructional cycle, one for a junior high class quest that we have, and then the other one is for 5th grade ELA. Both would be whole class reads. The 5th grade book is called Lifeboat 12. So we're asking for your approval for those. And then the next item, let me pull that up here, is the Kings High School College and Career Catalog for the 22-23 school year. So annually, we come to the board, present any changes to the educational program at the high school. And so I just want to highlight some of those items for you tonight. So the first one that's highlighted in the document is just improved content around math pathways for students that are better connected to job fields. So there have been some updates and changes at the post-secondary level. So colleges have been making changes to recommendations that they have for students in math entering the college level, both 2-year and 4-year programs. So there's been a movement at the state level to change up how we're teaching math. So we are kind of shifting away. In the state of Ohio, we're required for all students to take Algebra 2, for example. So what is kind of in motion now are some Algebra 2 equivalents that are better aligned to college and career opportunities that students will have at the secondary level. So instead of all students being required to take Algebra 2, for example, students who are involved or interested in a social science, for example, would benefit from having a different type of advanced math class that really is designed to discuss more statistics, perhaps probability, mathematics, modeling, and reasoning. So those are the pathways that are reflected here. So we have one class that's a mathematics Algebra 2 equivalent that we are teaching now, and that class is called Advanced Quantitative Reasoning. We're in a pilot with the state of Ohio. So the Ohio Department of Education has, in conjunction with other math educators across the state, both at the college level and the high school level, to create courses, which is really new business for the Ohio Department of Education, but it's been in collaboration with a lot of educators across the state. One of our teachers, Margie Coleman, has been heavily involved in that when she's our high school department chair. So she teaches advanced quantitative reasoning right now. We have an opportunity to add an additional Algebra 2 equivalent called data science next school year. It's a little bit up in the air because we haven't been approved. So we had to submit an application, and we won't know still for a couple weeks whether or not our application has been approved to provide that class as an opportunity for students. But we wanted to include it in our course description catalog. So data science really is interpreting data. So looking for patterns, looking for trends, and then how that information might be applied in decision-making for students. So that's what data science is about. Interestingly enough, our teachers and all teachers in districts across Southwest Ohio that are involved in these pilots meet regularly. And so King's is the host for the Advanced Quantitative Reasoning Southwest Ohio Math Group. We have a meeting here tomorrow morning, and what they do is they come together and they are planning lessons, they are reviewing assessments, they are really working to collaboratively create these opportunities for students. So those are some changes that we have around those courses, specifically data science. And once we get that formal approval, of course, we'll come and let you know. Fingers crossed that we will. All signs are pointing. I think that things will be fine, but we'll let you know for sure. Another change is just an increase in credit from 0.25 to 0.5 for advanced strength training. So with PE and health courses, we have a series of courses that, for the state requirement is 0.25 credits, but we have students that take many PE courses. Advanced strength training is an advanced class. It's really intended to be something where students have already met the PE requirement. So it's going to be a half a credit is what we're proposing then for those students as an elective. And then finally, we're cycling back in AP Modern European History, which is a class that is not new to King's. It's just we've changed the opportunities and the years that we offer it because it just makes better sense to do that. We have more students who are interested in taking the class if we do it in a cycle every other year. So it's difficult to offer classes sometimes in the master schedule if you only have 5 or 6 students that are interested in that. So we've moved to an every other year, and 22-23 would be when we cycle that class back in. And that really highlights the changes. The scheduling process is scheduled at the high school to begin mid-February. And so that begins with class meetings, and the guidance counselors, school counselors meet with students. They have gotten into the business of creating some pretty good videos that students can watch, that parents can also watch. All of those will be posted online that kind of guide them through this document and the course selection process for next school year. Questions on that? Those are our 2 items for approval.
I had a question on the instructional materials. You mentioned the Lifeboat 12 for the 5th graders, and I apologize if I missed it. Wonder for the 7th and 8th grade Quest students.
Yes.
Is that something we're voting on also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I apologize if I missed you mentioning that. I just wanted to make sure I understood. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Friedman, can you kind of go through the process on the instructional materials? What steps you took prior to asking for this approval this evening?
Sure, yeah. So it really it's generated at the teacher level. So teachers in the buildings, different classes work to keep reading materials and instructional materials fresh for students. So they bring it forward and make a request for something to be approved. And then from there, like with novels, for example, we have committees that are created where we have different people read those books, provide feedback, make a determination whether or not they think they're appropriate for the particular grade level and class that they're being asked to be approved for. This year, we've also added as a communication tool our Teaching and Learning Council, so that the teachers that have made the requests for these particular books to be approved came to our first Teaching and Learning Council in December and presented out those materials, why they selected them, how they intended to use them, et cetera. So then in December, then we first brought those materials to the board, gave an overview, and then this would be then the second kind of look for you as a board member, and then to make that final approval.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Peters and Mr. Lang did a very nice job presenting the Lifeboat 12 novel to us at the Teaching and Learning Council meeting. And it's a great book. It's a great book. I mean, I think for kids to read historical fiction in such a different way And then at the, at the end of the book to really have, all the facts of everything that happened. It was a great book. So please pass along to those two teachers that we appreciate that.
Thank you.
So Wonder's been used before, correct? Or is this the first time?
Well, it's in our library. Wonders in our library. This is not a new book. It's been around for a long, long time, but it's not been part of a whole class read.
Got it.
So that's why we're asking you to approve that.
And that's for the Aspire
The Quest,
or the.
Wonder would be
Quest.
for Quest, which is our intervention class at the junior high.
And as far as the math pathways classes, when will all of those, I mean, I know there's a goal to have more as time goes on. Is that correct? Is there a time frame that?
Well, data science will be, we got involved in the advanced